Okay.
You want to light this rocket?
You start.
He wants me to start because this is my favorite play. First play I ever saw, and I loved it at age 12. I still love it, but for entirely different reasons, which I find fascinating that the same play has enough to keep feeding into my life new insights, new ways to look at it. For anybody that's on recording, this is Twelfth Night, if you're coming in night. I'm Suzanne Sanders. This is John Miller.
I'm her sidekick.
He's the professor. I'm the comic relief. We asked everyone to read the first act, and we had a couple of questions about it. First thing was, what are your first impressions? What did you think of the characters when you first met them? Anybody, if you want to just raise your hand or if you want to just pop out with it, we want to hear where you are with the characters as we start. Don't be shy. Come on, this is a theater class.
I confess to utter confusion. That is, I couldn't keep track of anything, and therefore watching one of the versions was extremely helpful, although only a little. But I, of course, developed a fascination for some of the characters and a revulsion for others. Mm-hmm. Anyway, it was a rocky start. It wasn't a smooth one.
Okay. Anybody else?
I confess, going back to the version that I read, it had the list of characters and who was in which place and where they came from. And I had to go back and forth between that several times. Okay. I still don't know where Fabian came from or what he does, but that's okay.
Well, I noticed that you'd mentioned that, or I guess the notes mentioned that sometimes the play is, they switch and they do act 2 before they do act 1. So I thought I'd go ahead and read act 2 and see, what I thought. I don't know. Which would be preferable.
Well, I think you mean scene 1 and scene 2 of act 1. They swap, not act.
Okay, so now I'm not a Shakespeare buff.
You will be. I thought about the reversing the scenes, and it seemed to me personally that scene 2 set more context for what was happening or where they were, but it wasn't as poetic. So I thought scene 1 just drew you in more quickly.
Susan, I agree entirely. The scene 1 in the book, the rendition that we have, I mean, the language was the first line, right in, the drama was there, the excitement was there. Certainly scene 2 was better with context.
Right.
It wasn't anywhere near as exciting.
Right.
And also when you're looking at scene 1, Ursinio is the star of the show. He is your main character. And if they started with scene 2, at least in my mind, is it Viola or Viola? How do we pronounce her name?
Viola.
Viola, thank you.
Like Violet.
Viola is the
like Violet.
I have a question about her. I was having a hard time figuring out why she wanted to get into the middle of all this. What was it that initially led her to wanting to be in, I had a trouble finding the motivation.
Okay.
What she first did to get into the middle of all this.
Yeah, I think that's why swapping out the scenes is helpful, or many thought it helpful, because it sets where they are. Mm-hmm. Very much, they're in a mysterious land of Illyria, and what is she going to do now? And she decides, as anybody would, I'm sure, she's going to dress like a boy and become a servant. But I thought that kind of set the scene, and then it rolls. Orsino didn't impress me in any way, shape, or form. in any rendition or in reading the play or when I was in high school reading the play.
You're right.
So
Except
it's kind of
he has the best line in the beginning.
Yes, he does. Yeah. I love what is her name? Viola?
Viola.
Viola.
Violet.
Yeah. I think she's quite a character. I love this. Her cutting off her hair and sort of becoming a boy, which is, in her time, even, so dramatic. And then she's quite a talker. She's got a way of wrapping people right around her finger.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's definitely the hero of the play.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, and the other thing I love is that I had forgotten about Sir Toby Belch. And he's introduced, and I'm so excited because I always loved that character, and I forgot that he was in this play.
Yeah, nothing like a bunch of reprobates to really liven up
I
the
know.
plot. Well, I can understand why anybody would have trouble keeping the characters straight. Shakespeare had a real problem with names. And if you've ever seen Shakespeare in Love, they make fun of that, that he can never come up with good names, or his names sound too much alike. Olivia, Orsino, Viola, I mean, Malvolio, they all sound kind of like he mixed the same letters up in different forms to name people. Sometimes I think he's doing it on purpose because it's like the people are interchangeable, or to keep you kind of off balance. Because often his plays try to reproduce the feeling in the audience. You're someplace, you don't know exactly where you are, you don't have your usual setup, everything's confusing, you don't know all the language. He just sets it up so you're feeling the same thing. You're falling on the beach and you're walking up to the new land and saying, "What country, friends, is this?" It reproduces the feeling in the audience. And all I can say is bear with us,
Yes.
stick with us. Feel free to watch the movies instead of reading them, because that's how I started. I read them in school and it didn't catch me, but I started watching the movies actually as I did my exercise at home to keep my brain busy while I'm trying to ignore how much I was working the rest of me. And watching different versions of it made it all make sense.
Uh-huh.
So don't feel bad if you get confused. Feel free to ask any question. Don't think it's stupid or anything, because I've already asked it myself at some point. Usually John straightens me out.
No, not at all.
But on this one, I'm real enthusiastic. So
Good. I'd like to comment on Charlie's point of view about being confused, because I have read this play several times in preparation and watched various videos of it. And I haven't watched it enough, as my sidekick has, because I still am confused when I see these characters and have to remind myself, no, the person who is named has a male name is actually a woman, or the other way around. And I wanted just to share with you a brief paragraph here that comes from the Ardent Shakespeare, which is the sort of the Bible for all Shakespeare scholars, of which I do not count myself one. But this is the endings and beginnings. A play, like a cat, has several lives. It has a pre-theatrical life as an authorial manuscript, being read and perhaps modified by producers, actors, and others. It later becomes a performance script, undergoing rehearsal and possible further revision. It then becomes fully to life on stage, in the interplay between actors and audience. The performance takes on its own life and may be described, debated, and reviewed in other private or published texts. Each subsequent staging of the play is a new beginning, producing new responses. If the text of the play is printed or otherwise circulated, it may also enjoy various kinds of afterlife revivals, successive printings or editions, adaptations, film versions, quotations, and other works, critical analyses, even paintings of given scenes, etc. This introduction will give an account of some of the many lives of Shakespeare's Twelfth Night, or what you will, the multiple factors that make up its rich textual, theatrical, political, and cultural history. And that cultural history is being made somewhere in the world almost every day by productions that do have a totally different take. And in many ways, of course, the best way to experience Shakespeare is in the theater. And the best way to appreciate theater is to see many different versions of a play that you have come to like, or even one that you didn't know much about. This play, and we're going to talk about this, I'm sure, Suzanne is quite familiar with that. But this play really brings in the audience. The audience is not just a passive observer. We are required, or even passively, we become engaged in what the play is about. And there's a dark side, there's a bright side. It takes some getting used to, and sticking with it, as Suzanne just said, is really important. And things will presumably come to light a little bit later on. Correct?
Yeah, I'd say so. So let's see what's going on in this play. We start with, if music be the food of love, play on. Music is so important in this play. Think of it as a musical. Everybody has a little song and dance number in one way or another. People are presenting sides of themselves that they can't express in straight language. They sing it. They let their emotions out. So the fact that it actually starts talking about music means that they're going to try to get to the emotion beneath what's going on. At the same time that Shakespeare likes to keep the butts in the seats, so there's going to be song and dance numbers, there's going to be comedy, there's going to be mock battles, there's going to be all kinds of misunderstandings. Whenever you have people wearing disguises in one of his plays, that means he wants to uncover not just that person, but everybody. He wants to find out more about who they really are. So that's his plan. He lets you know right at the start. He opens with music. We're going to go deep. And depending on how they interpret this play, it may be deep into hilarity. It may be deep into bittersweet sadness. It may be deep into anger. So as we go along, if you say, I don't get it, what's this person doing? Why are they doing this? Why are they feeling this? You're doing exactly what he wants you to do. But he wants an excess of music. He doesn't want just the superficial. He wants us to be surfeited with it. He wants as much as he can take. So give us that emotion.
Exactly. You might notice too the reference to the music being not quite so sweet. In fact, Orsino says, "Enough, no more. It is not so sweet as it was before." So at the very beginning of the scene, there's music, and then that wonderful poetic line, and then stop. Enough. It's not quite so sweet as it was before. And then he goes on to a riff about the spirit of love. How quick and fresh art thou, that notwithstanding thy capacity receiveth as the sea, not enters there, of what validity and pitch soe'er, but falls into abatement and low price, even in a minute. So full of shapes is fancy, that it alone is high fantastical fantasy. You were wondering to that word.
That called to mind in me the Rodgers and Hart song, "Falling in love with love is falling for make believe."
Really?
There you go. You got it.
That'll be coming out of our.
He didn't care. I mean, because he didn't seem to care who he loved. He was, how kind of relationship he ever had with Olivia, nobody knows, right? And then he turns to Viola, who was really not my type, at least as depicted initially in this play.
Right.
So he had issues.
Yes, you could say Suzanne is he's an example of a romantic figure here.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Romantic comedy.
He's in love with love.
He's in love with love,
Yeah.
somewhat with himself.
Yeah, he's really into the idea of I am the greatest lover ever. I feel more than anybody has ever felt. I suffer more than anyone has ever felt. Suffering for love was a real big thing back then. If you were a real lover, you really suffered. It wasn't a pleasurable experience. So he's suffering like nobody's business. Everybody coming in this play is suffering.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main questions of the play is, how the hell are we going to perk up all these people and get them all straight and lined up and happy by the end of the play? It is a comedy. We got to get them happy. So they start out, he's suffering for love. When Viola comes in, she's suffering the loss of her brother.
Mhm.
She comes in the second scene with that line, "What country friend is this?" And here we are, lost. She's a woman alone in a strange country. She's obviously got a little something with her because she is able to dress up like her brother. Maybe she has a suitcase. I don't know.
I don't know.
But,
It would be very wet. All the clothes would be very wet.
oh yeah. It's not going to be pretty. But she is in a time period where a woman alone is not going to be treated very well. So the fact that she decides to dress up like a boy right away is not all that surprising.
Mm-hmm.
And also, of course, Shakespeare is making a little bit of fun there because all of his women were played by boy actors.
Mm-hmm.
So here we have a boy actor dressed up as a girl who's dressing up as a boy, and you got to keep straight what this character is. Again, he's trying to kind of knock you off your pins, get you disoriented, get you thinking about things in a different way than you would normally think about it. So
Very Victor Victoria.
you got it.
But can we go back to the suffering piece for a second?
Sure.
I mean, back in those times, there was no television, there was no videos. So, suffering was a form of entertainment in a way, because they had all kinds of ritual and tradition associated with suffering. So, it's that the melodrama.
Yeah.
In day-to-day life. Well, yeah, we have to wear the black veil for X amount of time, and you can't and you can't smile for Y amount of time. There's almost rules to it. The suffering for death, the suffering for love, and I just I agree with you. I mean that was apparent right from the start. Like, boy, they all love to suffer. Boy,
Right.
I'm suffering more than you are. Now I am.
I have a question, which
Yes.
I guess speaks to my difficulty understanding Shakespeare. I have to read everything over and over again to try to understand what he's actually saying. And I'm wondering, well, how typical is that language of the day? Or is it all of the antics and the acting out that really attracts people and keeps them in their seats? How much of it do they really understand, do you think, the general audience?
I would say most of them would understand it very well because it was an oral culture. They didn't have things written down. Most people didn't read and write all that much. And so you had to be able to follow people speaking and things that are complex when people are speaking. And they really loved wordplay back then. They thought it was the height of entertainment to watch somebody just go off on a riff. Imagine Robin Williams. They would have thought he was so great because he could riff on any character, at a moment's notice. They really liked that.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. What's your question?
I was just going to say, in response to it being hard to follow when you read, I taught some of this in high school, and I never sent the kids home to read it first because they would tell me immediately they didn't understand it. We would read it aloud in class, and surprisingly, I thought they're still going to have trouble, those kids. They didn't. They got it when we did the role play and read it aloud. So it definitely is meant to be heard.
Oh, yes, yes.
I mean, obviously it was written to be heard, but it works when it's heard.
Exactly. I think that's really important comment here. All of us who've taught Shakespeare at one point or have been students of Shakespeare in high school, we may have begun with reading the text, and it certainly goes the wrong way. You've got to experience it. Mm-hmm. And with a comedy here, people go to the theater expecting something pleasurable, something comic, something that will, for the moments that they're in that theater, they're going to be entertained with puns, with potential slapstick. You are primed for that. So once you go into the theater, you leave behind the world and you now enter into the world of imagination because the words are important, but then you are seeing the words acted out, and all of a sudden meaning leaps to life, and you can get more engaged in this. Right. And that's so important. And I think we do such a disservice to Shakespeare by reading with a text. And that's why Vince, we suggested that you look as many videos as you can to appreciate it.
Yeah, there's a scene further on with Sir Toby where he talks about, if I had a stone bow, I'd hit him in the eye. And I read that and I thought, what the heck is a stone bow? Well, I saw an actor go like that. It's like shooting, a slingshot. It's kind of a slingshot. And seeing the actor go, and then I understood it. So sometimes you just need the actors to help you along. But another thing you can do, John's going to hit me in the arm for this one. There are versions of Shakespeare in modern language with the original text side by side with the modern language. And sometimes it helps to read the modern language and get in your head what exactly is going on and what the gist of it is, and then read the original, and it kind of clarifies it.
We're talking Cliff's Notes, right? Simplified Shakespeare.
They're usually called something like Shakespeare in modern language or something like that. And that can help. And always try reading it out loud, because the language isn't that far from our language. When you say it, somehow your brain kind of picks up where you're going with it.
Yeah.
And
I was doing that right before we started, actually.
Yeah, that does help.
Right.
I think this I think this is relevant. I attended a British public school for a year and took the A-level syllabus, and we did Lear and The Tempest. And you had the whole year to study these plays. And the instructor, to my surprise, had us read the text out loud, but each class, you assumed a different character. So there were 15 cheeky English boys and me sitting around the classroom, and he would say, okay, today, you're going to play Lear, or you're going to play Kent or Oswald. And so having the experience of actually reading and hearing the words, but actually experiencing the role playing was, I thought it was bizarre at first, but by the end of the year, I came to appreciate how it brought the whole play together, because you personally had to, and it got better. We got better over the year.
Yeah. Well, you had a voice in the game, so to speak, Charlie.
Yeah.
You were playing different characters, and you got to know them better.
Yeah, I liked Kent at the beginning, but in the end, I liked the fool best.
Right.
Peggy, what were you going to say?
I was going to try to say that what I find very helpful to me is, after I've read it once or twice, then I have Audible edition. Mm-hmm. And so I listen to it, and I don't see the actors, but you hear the intonation, the quickness, the repartee. You get it back and forth because they're actors' voices, and that really helped me to put meaning to the words, and some of the stuff that I read, when I heard it, I was like, oh, that is really funny. So now I get it. So I needed that extra. So, yeah, there's a lot in here that it's really hard to directly translate because they just thought it was so funny to make up words and, make things that sounded like, for instance, the priests talk, that kind of stuff. They like to imitate the things that they heard during the day. And we don't hear the same things every day. So until you get a good actor up there kind of translating it into the jokes of our time, you don't necessarily get it right off the page. That's another reason to go see it whenever you can. I wish we had the whole year to read through, every permutation, but we're trying to just whet your appetite here.
Peggy, if I might just add, your mother-in-law was someone, the late mother-in-law was a wonderful person in her own right, but she would come to class often having read whatever play we were doing, and she'd make the very beginning, I just don't understand this stuff. I don't like this. I don't like Shakespeare. And then in the course of a few minutes, we would ask someone in the class to read. And then all of a sudden, this aha moment. Oh, this is wonderful. I really like this. It happened in a moment. And then she was hooked. And that was one of those wonderful things. So reading it it's important to read it because you can go deeper into the various meaning of words, but to see it is a choice. The text, you can do anything with that. You go deeper, you can look at former productions, but when you've got an actor doing it, then you're in the hands of the actor, and that actor and the director have to make decisions. They can't just stop and say, what are we going to do? The decision has to be made. And then that becomes a production that has its own movie life. That's the beauty of it all.
Right. Well, let's read a little bit of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Let's read a little bit of it. If you want to, let's talk about when Olivia comes in. This is Act 1, Scene 2, line 33. She comes into the story. This Viola and the sea captain are on the beach, and she's asking, who is this and who's in charge here, and trying to get the lay of the land. And he's told her about Orsino, and he talks about Olivia. And he mentions that Orsino is wooing Olivia. And he makes the line, "It was fresh in murmur. As you know, what the great ones do, the less will prattle of, that he did seek the love of fair Olivia." What great ones do, the less will prattle of. That's still true. What the great ones do, the lesser people will talk about and prattle, because Shakespeare can't just say talk. He has to be more specific. He gives you the prattle. It's not deep, important stuff. He's making a little side, you know how the world is, you know how it works. So, you might have to translate a word here and there, but basically they're living in the same sort of world we are in a lot of ways. And so you just got to find the door, the way in.
Wonderful.
Yeah, when Olivia, they start talking about her, the first thing they bring up is that she's lost her brother. She lost her father shortly before that. Now, Viola responds to that. She's just lost her brother, she thinks. And, she doesn't know for sure. She didn't see him. Sea captain tries to console her by saying, I saw him strapped to a mast on the waves, trying to give her some hope. But she thinks basically it's not looking good for me. And then she hears about Olivia, who's also lost her brother. And she immediately feels a connection. She wants to go work for her. She wants to go talk to her. She wants to meet her. Everyone in this play is suffering at the start. They're mourning. They don't have what they want. They're lost. There are a lot of people that are unhappy at the start of this. I think, Shakespeare might have been setting himself up with a challenge here. how miserable can I get them at the start and get them happy at the end? So, we have to see whether he manages this trick and whether he pulls this rabbit out of the hat as we go along. Let's find another quote for. There's a lot about the sea.
Mhm.
I find a lot of quotes about the sea.
Right.
There is that one about Arian's back.
Right?
Yeah. To a strong mast that lived upon the sea, where, like Arian on the dolphin's back, I saw him hold acquaintance with the waves, so long as I could see. Arian is one of those characters from mythology. They usually show him with like a mermaid's tail or something, riding around at home in the ocean. So he's picking an image of something noble and at home in the water. So she feels like, okay, he'll be all right. He can survive this. But she's more realistic than that. She's like, she's not really taking it. She thanks him for it. She gives him a little gold for it. I assume some piece of jewelry or something. So she obviously has some stuff with her. So you know that right off. So with just those few lines, you get a sense of he's being very kind. He's also intelligent. She thanks him, but she's nobody's fool. She knows that this is not likely. And all of that from just one little exchange.
Exactly. Also, as Suzanne just said, the myth of the dolphin goes way back. Dolphins being coming to one's aid when someone is drowning. This maybe gives us sort of a note of hope that even the depths of the deep, dark sea, there is something even in that ocean that wants to sustain life, that will bring people to the shore for no other reason than some kind of connection with humanity. You hear that all the time about the dolphin. And it's an important image. It's really old, but it perhaps gives a false sense of security that riding on the dolphin's back could somehow have saved people from potential drowning. And it's such a little inkling, isn't it? With something so much deeper behind it.
We're going to have another sea captain come in later. Both of the sea captains are like guardian angels for characters here. I find that kind of interesting, being as England is a seafaring nation, as they keep saying. Yes, Anne, you had something to...
No, I was just agreeing that both of the captains are kind souls.
Well, then after all of this suffering right at the start, in scene 3, here come the clowns. We get Toby, Mariah, yeah, that's how you pronounce it, and Andrew, Sir Andrew Ague-Cheek. In case you didn't know, ague is like malaria. So they're saying that he's kind of sallow and thin-faced, and he's not very handsome. He's kind of he's got scraggly, long and light hair, probably blonde, but who knows exactly. Just he's not the catch that you might want.
But he had money.
But he has money, and
$3,000 a year.
Yeah, Toby has convinced him that he needs to woo Olivia. Olivia is Toby's possibly niece, possibly cousin. They were a lot looser about names like that back then. They would call people cousin if they were just like a close friend. They would call people uncle if they were cousins, or just uncles by marriage or whatever, if they were like a little bit older people. So we get Toby and Mariah and Andrew coming in. And Andrew, he's as tall a man as any in Illyria. Every time I hear that line, it just cracks me up, because why would you say for the first thing about somebody, he's taller than anybody? It's like writing a Match.com profile, and the only thing you can think of to say is, well, he's tall.
Oh,
And And then Maria has a wonderful comment there. Well, so what? What does that have to do with the argument? That's a good point, isn't it?
My version explained tall as brave.
That's one of the things you run across in Shakespeare, that words have slightly shifted their meaning, but often it ends up either becoming a different sort of a joke, like, that he's tall, or things that weren't a joke back then become a joke. A little later, someone says, "Are you a comedian?" Meaning, are you an actor who plays comedies in the theater? But to us, it's a comedian because they've said something funny and it turns it into a joke. So sometimes you lose the jokes, but sometimes you gain ones that they might not have meant as jokes back in the day. It keeps it bubbling.
Yeah, and Toby goes on even further. We learned Mariah, however you want to say it, says, but he'll have but a year in all these ducats. He's a very fool and a prodigal. And then Toby, fie, that you'll say so. He plays of the vile de Gamboys and speaks 3 or 4 languages, word for word without book, and hath all the good gifts of nature. Where are we going with this? And Mariah, hath indeed almost natural. But for besides that, he is a fool. He is a great quarreler. And but that he hath the gift of a coward to allay the gust that he hath in quarreling. We thought among 'tis thought among the prudent, he would quickly have the gift of a great. And all this repartee back and forth is really wonderful to watch and to hear.
Yeah, Toby's pushing the guy. He's selling him. And Mariah's like, I'm having none of this. I know who this guy is. Don't give me the advertising bit. She's not fooled.
Remember on the drinking thing, Mariah says, they to add, moreover, he's drunk nightly in your company. And Toby says, with drinking healths to my knees. I'll drink to her as long as there is a passage in my throat and drink in Illyria. He's a coward and a cloistered, he is a coward and a cloistral that will not drink to my niece till his brains turn to the toe like a parish top. What, wench? Here comes Sir Andrew Aguchik. So here we go. We've already been introduced.
It becomes a song and dance number.
It's a musical.
When you think about these different characters, I find it interesting to think about them as different actors. Sir Toby, a lot of times he's played as like a big, fat, complete drunk. And I think that's a little bit of a mistake because he's got some charisma to him. He can talk people into things. He's entertaining. He is an aristocrat, so he's had some education. And I find it interesting to put somebody in my brain that's different while I'm reading this, like Peter O'Toole. Okay, here's somebody, big drinker, charismatic, got an aristocratic edge, can talk a lot of people into bad behavior. If you think about different people in the different roles, sometimes you can kind of nail what kind of character it is. And then the language starts making sense. He's the enthusiastic guy that's going to go out and keep the party rolling. Though I got to add one thing. Why is he so driven to be partying so hard? He's lost. Maybe it's his brother, his nephew. Some people react to loss by putting it out of their head, saying, let's go drinking, let's go do something, let's go traveling, let's have fun. And, he's kind of cast adrift as well. Mm-hmm. So, you got to give him a little bit more depth than he often gets in, especially like TV versions, that kind of thing.
I think that there's a wonderful history in Shakespeare of using fools and clowns to make some of the most profound statements.
Exactly. Yes.
It's not just. It's just such a beautiful way of delivering these zingers from people that you don't expect to be able to say them, to think them.
I thought this fool had a great line when he said, "Many a good hanging prevents a bad marriage."
Yes, that's
That
right.
caught me.
Yeah.
That is a good one. I like the line, is this a world to hide virtues in? You know, it's like we would say, come on, bro, put it out there, you know, or something like that. You know, is this a world to hide virtues in? Well, you know, a little bit more depth there. So we go to scene 4. I have no idea what time it is, by the way. You have to keep me in line. I'll talk forever on this. Scene 4, first appearance of Cesario. That's Viola in boy's dress. Now, Viola figures out she's in love with Orsino. Doesn't take people long to fall in love in this play. I think it helps to remember that everybody was pretty young. You know, it's a little bit more high school. You know, people fall in love pretty quick.
Well, they were young and they didn't live that long, so they had to make it happen.
Yeah, you couldn't waste time.
Gather your rosebuds while you may.
Good point.
So here she is in the position of realizing she's in love with this man, and the first thing he wants her to do is go over to this other woman and say how much he loves her. All while she's dressed as a boy, so she can't show how much she loves him. We start to tie the knots up. There's going to be all kinds of knotting up through the course of the play, and then there'll be the fun of trying to unknot them at the end.
Yes, we have Arsenio. This is about line 10, and he's got Curio in attendance. And Viola says, "Here comes the Count." And Arsino says, "Who saw Cesario? Ho?" Viola, "On your attendance, my lord, here." And then Arsino to Curio and to the attendants, "Stand you aloof a while." In other words, can you just withdraw? "Cesario, thou, I know'st no less, but all I have unclasped to thee the book even of my secret soul. Therefore, good youth, address thy gate unto her. Be not denied access. Stand at her doors and tell them, there thy fixed foot shall grow till thou have audience." And Viola says, "Sure, my noble lord, if she be so abandoned to her sorrow, as it is spoke, she never will admit me." And Arsenio says, "But be clamorous and leap all civil bounds rather than make unprofited return." Viola says, "Say I do speak with her, my lord. What then?" But then unfold the story of how much Orsino loves her. She's the go-between here, and she's trying to speak truth, and yet she is getting herself, as you just said, the knots begin to get more and more complicated in this particular scene.
This brings in the question of, how do you express your love? How do you say to somebody you love them in a way that'll get through the armor that everybody has on the surface? He sounds a little like a stalker. He says, don't take no for an answer. You know, go over there, insist on getting in there, and tell her how much I'm suffering. Tell her all about me. Tell her, you know, how bad I have it and everything.
And be clamorous, you know, be rude. Even.
Be rude and make some noise. Kick the door down.
Now I see the irony of this. He's sowed the seed of his own destruction, so to speak. Then unfold the passion of my love. Surprise her with discourse of my dear faith. It shall become thee well to act my woes. Little does he know he's handed her the keys to the kingdom.
It's wonderful.
There's also a little description in here of what Viola looks like dressed as a boy. That I find it, you know, it's just a little dig. Okay. he thinks that she'll do better than the old guys that he's been sending over as messengers because she's so young. And she says, "Oh, I don't think I'll be that good at it." And he's like, "Dear lad, believe it, for they shall yet belie thy years that say thou art a man. Diana's lip is not more smooth and rubious. Thy small pipe is as a maiden's organ, shrill and sound, and all is semblance of a woman's part." He knows it's a woman in his inner self somewhere. But of course, she's in men's clothes. And in that time, women didn't wear men's clothes. So must be a man. And so you wonder through this play at the different times they get together. You get the feeling that maybe that part of him that knows she's a woman is kind of saying, "Go for it, go for it, go for it." And the part that doesn't is saying, "I am really attracted to this boy. I don't know what's going on here." So you got that angle coming into the story at this point. Excuse me.
What does it mean when he says, "Prosper well in this, and thou shalt live as freely as thy Lord," that there'll be a financial recompense for that?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that he won't be treated as a servant so much, living freely, able to come and go as he pleased, that kind of thing as well. So, yeah, you do good with this, and we'll bump you up. You'll move up in the company. Yeah, we're starting to set up the little love affairs here in that same in scene 5, line 25. The Fool and Mariah are kind of back and forth a little bit. And the Fool makes his comment that if Sir Toby would leave drinking, thou art as witty a piece of Eve's flesh as any in Illyria. He's saying, girl, you got it going on. If Toby just weren't drunk all the time, he would know it. And I know that you like Toby and you got your eye on him. So they're setting up all these different little wheels rolling. It's like a machine with a lot of cogs that are all going to be interlocking as the story goes on. That's why it seems like it's confusing when you read it. But when you're watching it and you can keep all the different characters separate, it often gets easier. Got it. Oh, I have another quote for you guys. Let me bring in a quote from this guy. Okay, see this guy? This is Simon Goodwin, the artistic director for the Shakespeare Theater in DC. And they asked him, you've done productions where you've re-envisioned Shakespeare with women playing male characters, for instance. Do you think it's sort of endlessly malleable or interpretable? And his answer is really interesting, I think. Is it endlessly malleable or interpretable? I do, actually. I think Shakespeare's a bit like a puppy that really loves to be engaged and played with, because he himself was such an interesting, subversive, unpredictable force. And it's a tribute to his genius that his plays have a strange kind of, oh, we lost our internet, strange kind of almost incomplete quality about them, which means that they're always waiting to be completed by the community and the moment in history that they're being performed in. He knows that the most important thing in any Shakespeare play is the people watching it, the people reading it, the people listening to it. What you bring to it is the gem that makes it sparkle. So if you don't have it right at the start, keep trying, because the rest of us need you in there.
Exactly. Yes. Can
Is
everybody
Ann?
hear us? Yes.
Yeah.
There was a class you taught on trending Shakespeare. And one of the things that you said was to just read it and kind of just let it go by you, but keep going and you'll get it. And I have found that extremely useful.
Thank you, Alicia. Yeah. I think it's kind of like I get the same thing when I try to listen to something like rap music that I can't understand what anybody's saying at first. And I keep listening, and all of a sudden it's like it kicks in. And Shakespeare's the same way. I just am kind of lost when it first starts up, but then it's like my head gets tuned or something, or my ears latch on to the rhythm of it. Music again.
Exactly.
Again. And thank you, Alicia, for bringing that in.
It's like a child listening to an adult conversation, when in those years when the children were supposed to be quiet and listen. And if you listen long enough, you can get the gist of what's happening. Even though it's language you don't use, and they're not talking specifically to the child, but there is sense there. Pick it up.
Hopefully.
I have
sense and beauty. I mean, oh my goodness. I think about how did he or whoever wrote these things, how did they come up with such beautiful language, line after line after line? I have to stop and be amazed.
Yeah,
keep on giving.
I think it's, in a way, that's a really interesting observation, Karen. I think Shakespeare had that genius, but also becomes captivated by his own creation. You've got a character, and then you see it played. Perhaps the next night you do it a little bit differently. It's that kind of fascination with words and is being taken away by a character. We saw that in Merchant of Venice, when you all of a sudden the feeling of a particular character becomes, the merchant becomes really important. And Shakespeare seems to be totally enthralled with the character and exploring it. You can see him working, not as if he's going through draft after draft, but becoming enmeshed in his own imagination. And that's kind of a process that you can see happening. This play particularly feels that way.
Yeah.
That he's working out something, and we don't quite know where this is all going to go. But we've certainly got the beginning here. Everybody seems to be a fool of one way or another, including even the audience. We'll have some observations about that a little bit later on, too.
Yeah, some of the characters seem to take over, like a little later, Malvolio. He became so popular that there were versions of the play just called Malvolio because everybody liked his character and what happens to him so much. But going back to the Fool, there's a little bit about the Fool that I would like to read, where he's first talking to Olivia, and he says, after a whole bunch of stuff that doesn't make a lot of sense to us because he's just kind of riffing off of words and stuff, he says, give me leave to prove you are a fool. Give me permission to prove that you're a fool like me. She says, make your proof. Okay. Says, it's 60. We're in Act 1, Scene 5, around about line 60. Okay. I must catechize you. Excuse me. I must catechize you for it, Madonna. Good my mouse of virtue, answer me. So he's giving her this as in the form that she would have heard being asked questions in the church. Catechizer. Well, sir, for one of other idleness, I'll bide your proof. Good Madonna, why mourn'st thou? Good fool, for my brother's death. I think his soul is in hell, Madonna. I know his soul is in heaven, fool. The more fool, Madonna, to mourn for your brother's soul being in heaven. Take away the fool, gentlemen. He's trying to turn her mournfulness and her depression around. That's what fools do. They turn your low moods around. And the first thing he does is give her the idea that it's not as horrible as you think. So he's helping her. She knows that he wants to help her. You notice they use thou among each other. Now, we don't do this anymore, but if you've ever taken something like French or Spanish, you know about the familiar terms and the formal terms. Using thou means that there's a closeness between them. Normally, a servant like a fool would never, never, never call a countess thou, but he's comfortable enough to do it. And she calls him thou back, partially because he's a servant. Servants were all considered like children. You know, you could call them what you wanted. But it also shows a closeness. We find out later that the fool was one of her favorites of her father. And so she probably grew up with this guy. You know, she's used to the way he talks, and there's a familiarity there. So she lets him say things that she would not listen to from anyone else. He's an allowed fool. So when Malvolio comes in and she starts talking about an allowed fool, she means one that has the permission to say whatever he wants. So it's important that you know that somebody is working hard in the middle of this play to turn it around and make it a comedy. And that's the fool.
But I like your point that, you know, he also showed compassion. You know, I really did. I didn't get that. But now that you say it, I see it. He not just trying to prove her wrong, but trying to give her some solace. So thank you for that.
There's a lot of sweetness in this play. There are a lot of people that are very gentle with others at times, where, you know, you might not be that way normally, but they have some compassion. They try to be empathetic. They try to look at it from another person's point of view, that kind of thing.
Well, just as you said, using the familiar you. I used to say kind of a rule of thumb is if you would call someone by his first name.
That's a good way to put it.
Familiar you.
Thanks, Debbie.
Yeah. And that's what you can see. There's a long family relationship here, and he watched her grow up. Yeah. And you still have that relationship.
We have Malvolio at line 80. Olivia says, "How say you to that, Malvolio?" And Malvolio speaks. "I marvel your ladyship takes delight in such a barren rascal. I saw him put down the other day with an ordinary fool that has no more brain than a stone. Look you now, he's out of his guard already. Unless you laugh and minister occasions to him, he is gagged. I protest I take those wise men that crow, so all these that set kind of fools no better than the fools zanies." And Olivia says, "Oh, you are sick of self-love, Malvolio, and taste with a distempered appetite. To be generous, guiltless, and of free disposition is to take those things for bird bolts that you deem cannon bullets. There is no slander in an allowed fool, though he do nothing but rail, nor no railing in a known discreet man, though he do nothing but reprove."
You notice she points out something about Malvolio that's going to come into the plot later.
Right.
You are sick of self-love.
Right.
She recognizes that he thinks he's all that. And he thinks that his view is the only view that is correct. And so there's little hints like that as you go through the play, is setting you up for what's happening. But the fool comes in again when Olivia has some time alone with him after Sir Toby has wandered through. She said, "What's a drunken man like, fool? He's like a drowned man, a fool, and a madman. One draft above heat." That means, you know, the first drink that just warms you up a little bit makes him a fool. The second mads him, and the third drowns him. I personally have this running joke with my husband whenever we go out to a bar about, let's guess how many drinks everybody's had already by how angry or loving or goofy or whatever they are. You know, there's a progression. I used to be a bartender. You can tell. You can tell how many they've had by what level they're at. And the fool here is presenting the same thing. They start out as a fool, then they go mad, and then they get completely drowned. And here's that sea imagery again coming in. You get layers with Shakespeare. There are things going on that are telling the story. There are things that are telling about the characters, and there are things that are just like themes, like waves going through the story. So. Got one you want to move to?
Let me see. You go ahead.
This is where Cesario comes in first appearance as the messenger. Now, what kind of man is he? Well, Malvolio says, of mankind. What manner of man? A very ill manner. He would speak to you whether you will or no. Now, what do you think? Is he being willfully ignorant here? Is he caught up in his own idea of what's going on and he's pretty much ignoring what Olivia says? What was your feeling when you got this exchange between Malvolio and Olivia about Cesario?
I think that Malvolio is in love with her and is absolutely trying to prevent this young man coming talk.
Good point.
Mm-hmm.
Good point.
Well, and the Count told him, he said, go ahead and be rude, yell, don't pay any attention to manners, and that's just what he's doing here.
Yeah, and when Olivia says,
yeah,
of what personage in years is he? Malvolio, not yet old enough for a man, nor young enough for a boy. As a squash is before, as is before, 'tis a peascod, or a codling, when 'tis almost an apple. 'Tis with him in standing water, between boy and man. He's very well favored, and he speaks very shrewishly. One would think his mother's milk were scarce out of him.
He's getting younger by the minute.
Exactly. And then Olivia, let him approach. Call in my gentlewoman. Malvolio, gentlewoman, my lady calls. There is affection there.
There is.
Indeed.
Yep. So when Cesario comes in, we're around Act 1, Scene 5, roundabout in the 200s there. You start seeing that Olivia is pretty witty.
Mm-hmm.
She comes up with her own jokes. She's learned something from the fool over the years. And Cesario, Viola, is also witty. They do a bit of sparring. There's a certain amount of discussion of just how pretty are you? Well, yeah, it's beautiful if God did all. I've heard that delivered like a woman saying, if God did all, whether you can call the plastic surgeon, that kind of thing. So they're kind of sparring a bit. And you'll notice that Orsino has not sent over anything witty to be told. It's all about him and how suffering he is and his deep feelings, which, yes, they might be very deep and painful feelings, but what's that got to do with her? Whereas Cesario comes in, gives her some wit, catches up with her, sees where she's going, follows her lead, and she starts to fall in love with him. Here we go again. Everybody falling in love.
But they speak the same language.
Yes, they do.
She's lived that. She's had those thoughts. She's watched that progression. She knows the script. She had that unfair or that advantage that none of the men did. But I'd like to go back to a comment you just made about the fool.
Yeah.
how you said Olivia learned something from him in her sparring here. Well, that and a little light bulb went on. Okay, so not only was he a comforter, he was a teacher.
Mhm.
You know, a teacher, a caretaker. You know, adding to the list of things that I never really occurred to me that fool would have that job, because I hear the word fool in my head, and it means something else.
It's funny to think of. We're talking about imaginary characters here, but they're so vivid that it's almost impossible to think of them as not having a life on the other sides of the play. You find yourself thinking, well, of course, this is what happened when they were kids, and this is what happens after the end of the story. And, there are certain scholars that really hate that because they're like, stick to the text. But if the characters are that good that you want to continue their story in either direction, I don't see anything wrong with it.
But the fool may be older than some of the other people, because as you and I were talking one time, Suzanne, he was valued by Olivia's father. So he may be wiser than all of the other people because he was from a different generation, or could be from a different generation.
Yeah, he's the old family retainer.
Yeah.
And I wonder also, when he first comes in, he's obviously been away, and he's come back. And why was he away? Well, I can't help but think that maybe when the father died, he just couldn't be there. That, he had to go away for a while. Maybe it was also because the house was so glum that even he couldn't jolly it out of there. So there really wasn't anything for him to do for a while. But
he's not sure how Olivia is going to receive him.
Mm-hmm.
Remember, Maria says you've been gone for so long.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And he's suffering too. The suffering fool. And he's the one who sings the beautiful songs that are melancholy,
Yeah,
if you look at them deeply.
They're all in kind of a minor key.
Yeah.
What is this protocol here where she puts her veil on? Is that something that was common because he was unknown to her?
Well, she has made that promise earlier on about for 7 years, no one will see her.
She's in mourning.
Yeah, because she's in mourning.
Oh, I see. Okay.
And so, I mean, it's not like nobody will see her at all. She's wearing a veil, she's covering herself up. And often at the time, women would veil themselves when they were in public, just so strangers couldn't be gawking at them and stuff.
Mm-hmm. You still see that now in funeral processions.
Mm-hmm.
A woman, the widow, being veiled as a sign of mourning.
But when she gets to talking about when Viola says, good madam, let me see your face, there was a thing that they do back then when someone got a new painting. They'd put a curtain in front of it. And sometimes you see like the Queen of England goes someplace and they take this little curtain and open it up to show the painting. The first time it's presented. And they're kind of riffing on that as well. Like she's this beautiful painting, and here the curtain goes up, and here she is. Oh, what a wonderful painting. And so Viola says, good madam, let me see your face. This is around 230, line 230. Have you any commission from your lord to negotiate with my face? You are now out of your text, but we will draw the curtain and show you the picture. So she removes her veil and she says, look you, sir, such a one as this I was at present. 'Tis not well done. And Viola says, excellently done if God did all.
Oh, I love it.
She's already painted.
Yeah. Tis ingrain, sir, 'twill endure wind and weather. So, Olivia gives as good as she gets. That last line about ingrain, sir, what they're talking about is dyeing leather so that the dye goes into the leather and into the grain of the leather. That's a little thing probably Shakespeare learned from his dad, the glover, who had to work with leather back in the day. But what's interesting to me about that line is I listened to it for years thinking it's ingrained, sir.
Uh-huh.
And so the language has changed, but it still works. What a lucky turn.
Right. You might look at Viola's line around 238. Viola says, "'Tis beauty truly blent, whose red and white nature's own sweet and cunning hand laid on. Lady, you are the cruelest she alive, if you will lead these graces to the grave and leave the world no copy." And Olivia, "Oh, sir, I will not be so hard-hearted. I will give out divers schedules of my beauty. It shall be inventoried, and every particle and utensil labeled to my will, as item, 2 lips, indifferent, red. Item, 2 gray eyes with lids to them. Item, 1 neck, 1 chin, and so forth. Were you sent hither to praise me?" Viola says, "I see you what you are. You are too proud. But if you were the devil, you are fair. My lord and master loves you. Oh, such love could be but recompense through you more crowned, the nonpareil of beauty." Olivia, "How does he love me?" Viola, "With adorations, fertile tears, with groans that thunder love, that sighs of fire." Then you go on. This is kind of typical, excessive romantic poetry, that the tears are just sort of gushing like waterfalls. It's a great exaggeration. And Olivia says, "Your lord does know my mind. I cannot love him. Yet I suppose him virtuous, know him noble, of great estate, of fresh and stainless youth, in voices well divulged, free, learned, and valiant, and in dimension, in the shape of nature, a gracious person. But yet I cannot love him. He might have took his answer long ago." And then Viola, "If I did love you in my master's flame, with such suffering, such deadly life, in your denial, I would find no sense. I would not understand it." What's going on here?
They're sizing each other up.
Sizing each other up?
Yeah.
This goes
They're
back to the
playing. They're having
question.
so much fun talking, playing
Yes.
with words here.
They're also going back to the question of how do you express your love? It's like that book, The 5 Love Languages, that was out a few years back. Viola likes all of that suffering and groaning and moaning and everything. So she thinks Orsino's pretty interesting. Olivia's got no interest in that stuff at all. She wants somebody witty and sparkling and quick and holds her feet to the fire and that kind of thing. So you're seeing different ways of going for love and different ways of expressing love kind of bumping up against one another here.
Flirtatious banter.
What was that?
Flirtatious banter with
There
effect.
you go.
Right.
But it was also this undercurrent with Olivia as women as property.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, here's my inventory. I got the 2 eyes. I got the lips. You want to check the teeth? You know.
Well, there's quite a speech that Viola says when Olivia says, "Why, what would you?" And she replies, "Make me a willow cabin at your gate and call upon my soul within the house. Write loyal cantons of contented love and sing them aloud even in the dead of night. Hallow your name to the reverberate hills and make the babbling gossip of the air cry out, Olivia! Oh, you should not rest between the elements of air and earth, but you should pity me, Olivia says. You might do much. What is your parentage? Viola. Above my fortunes, yet my state is well. I am a gentleman. The Willow Cabin.
Oh, it's so
What is
sweet.
that? What is that all about?
But Olivia's question, what would you, is an invitation to extend the flirtatious banter. Let me hear it again.
Yeah.
Let's see what else you got.
Exactly.
Stop talking for that guy and tell me what you think.
Yeah. Let me hear a little more, and maybe I'll have and by the end of it, the hook has been set.
Yeah.
Might do much. What is your parentage? Now I need to know a little bit more about you.
Nothing new.
I love that little speech Olivia gives and says, oh, by the way, come back and don't tell me any more about him. But oh, by the way, come back and tell me about him so I can see you again.
I like listening to you.
Let him send you more. And let's that you come to me again. She said, oh, maybe you're going to come back.
Yeah, well, I want everybody to note that last speech from Olivia that is to Malvolio that you're pointing out there. Olivia has a ring, and she tells Malvolio, take this ring to that messenger. Okay, run after that same peevish messenger, the county's man. County means count or duke. He left this ring behind him, would I or not? Tell him I'll have none of it. And she gives him the ring. Desire him not to flatter with his lord. That means don't punch it up with your lord. Don't give him any hope, nor hold him up with any hopes. I am not for him. If that youth would come this way tomorrow, I'll give him reasons for it. Hie thee, Malvolio. And he says, Madam, I will. What I want you to look at for next time is what does Malvolio actually say to Cesario when he catches up with him with the ring? And compare it with this little bit around about line 307. What message does he give? Is it the same message that Olivia told him to give? If it isn't, how's it changed? If it is, what's it say about the way he expresses it? And for next time,
on that note,
next time we're going to be talking about Acts 2 and 3. Oh my God, we barely got through 1, but we'll give it a shot. Now, does anybody have any questions?
Is confusion still reigning, or we got some clarity?
No, getting good clarity.
Better, much better.
Better.
I was interested that there was an alternate title for the 12th night.
Yes. Yep.
Was that common? Was that something that Shakespeare had done to other plays? Has Hamlet named something that I'm not aware of?
A couple of his comedies have alternate titles, but this one in particular, I think he's given a hint that it's really important how you look at it yourself in this one. What you will is however you want. It's your choice, dealer's choice. You get to look at it the way you want. You get to bend it the way you want. You get to pick out what parts you want to focus on.
I see.
But also it's said that Queen Elizabeth asked him to write something for Twelfth Night. And so it might have been a nod towards what you will, meaning, what the Queen wanted.
Well, is there some play on the idea that was the night when the Magi arrived at the Christ child's crib? Is there some play on that significant of the meaning of 12th night?
It's interesting you bring that up, because Twelfth Night is almost never mentioned in the play. But you're correct about what it is. it had become a time of revelry, and that there might even be a kind of a cake where a person would find a little ring inside it, and you become the king. It had been sort of
a ring, huh?
Yes, exactly. But what you will certainly points, I think, for this play, for all the kind of chaos. It's what do you make of it? Make of it what you will. I put this marvelous drama right here in front of you, and what does it mean? Well, is there an absolute meaning? What you will is the kind of almost, I've read somewhere, almost in your face. Okay,
Yep.
Okay, you tell me what it's all about, says the playwright.
And you also have another thing. Back then, will meant sexual desire. People talking about their, having their will or wanting their will or something like that. A lot of times they were looking to get laid. So, what you will.
Accost her.
Yeah.
We'll see that word.
Mistress Mary Accost.
Accost.
Yes.
That's a real.
Or what you? Hey, Will.
Yep. Yeah. So he's playing with the words there. He's having a good time.
Yeah, we're going to see further on in our next class too that the amount of erotic elements that are in the background or sometimes in the foreground. So it gets exciting.
Oh yeah.
So stick with it, everybody.
I'm just reading on the internet now. Since somebody says he could have called it "As You Like It," but it was taken.
On that note,
What You Will is also a play on his name.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure he heard every different joke that could be done with Will when he was a kid. So, and now he's just handing a little bit of it back out again.
I just checked. It was performed for Twelfth Night, the Magi. That was a celebration held by the Queen. So there.
Always have a party at the castle.
It was January 6th.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody. I think our clock is about run out.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Feel
Thank
free
you
to
so much.
email or whatever if you have any questions afterwards. I
Hey,
can't do it.
See you
bye.
next week, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you.